This episode of The Answer is Yes Baja Sessions is brought to you by Baja Bound Insurance Services. Driving to Mexico? You can buy and print out your Mexican auto insurance policy online in minutes with their easy-to-use website. They also have great travel information to help you plan your trip south of the border. Visit bajabound.com.
Hello and welcome to Baja Sessions. I'm your host today, Jim Riley. We've got Ryan Thomas down in Scorpion Bay, probably doing some surfing about right now. It's 10:20 my time. Hopefully he's already in for a second session with his wife and kids. And we were happy to jump back in after a few months off of the Baja Sessions show. If you haven't caught my The Answer is Yes show, that's on basically around Wednesday, same channel. We've got some great leaders coming up pretty soon. And as usual, we've got some interesting guests coming up, and especially today for me, I've met a new person. His name is Michael Emery. He's here in the studio. Michael, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jim. Really delighted to be here.
Yeah, thanks for driving over. I know you came from L.A.
Yeah, downtown.
Even
no traffic. It was really amazing, honestly.
You're going the right direction today.
Absolutely.
So I got an email from you thanking me for the podcast with our interview with Bruce Myers, and I appreciate getting any and all feedback. It's always nice that people are listening, so I know we at least had one listener that week. But that's how I met you, and I know you've been out there and you've been a fan of Baja for many years, and I want to hear all about it. But what was it about the Bruce Myers interview that struck you enough to write us an email?
Well, you know, Bruce is a really great guy. First of all, I'm just going to be honest. I was searching Baja podcast content, and I saw an interview with Bruce Myers. I didn't have my readers on. I'm over 50, didn't have my readers on. And I thought, oh, is this Bruce Myers, the car collector guy who started the Peterson Museum? Or is it Bruce Myers, the Baja, Myers-Manx guy? So I clicked on it. Obviously, it's Myers-Manx. Great story. Just, a guy who I knew about my entire life, growing up reading my dad's old road and track magazines. I was well aware. I photographed Baja racing in the 80s. So certainly I knew about the Myers-Manx story in, vague terms. I just didn't know any of the details. And I didn't know about his patent issues and his, basically losing the control of creating the Myers-Manx and the fiberglass dune buggy, and that, all those other folks built kits and made money off of his idea. And what I really didn't know, and he was quite clear about just how bitter he was about how that happened.
Yeah.
And then the epiphany that he had about getting past it. And somebody said to him, you have to celebrate this. You can't be bitter about it. And he'd been bitter, in his own words, over 20 years.
At least.
Yeah, 24, I think is what he said.
Yeah.
And I had some issues that came up a year ago, and I've been kind of kicking myself for it, and it's just been eating at me, and I just thought, what the heck? It's like, celebrate. It's out there, and it's successful, and I'm out of it, but it's living on its own, and, move on to the next thing. And why am I still beating myself up over something that happened, before?
Yeah, I think sometimes, and I've been in that world as well, you create something and then it moves on, and you can have that little bit of bitterness, but, I like to think about the upside of it too, whether it was the jobs that were created in the process, maybe it's iconic brand like what Bruce Myers had created and the memories that people have around that vehicle and what they've done in it. And to be able to celebrate that instead of the selfishness of I could have made more money or this could still all be mine. I like to think about the upside of it. And by the way, during that interview, it was one of those interviews where Bruce and his wife were there and a couple of the people that work around his house. It was very emotional. He came to tears a couple times, and you can tell he's very passionate about his own life. And we actually cut the original interview in 2 parts because it was so long. We could have literally talked to Bruce for 8 hours and had all original content. And it's like, where do we cut this thing? Because he is so rich in memories and life and the things that he's done and the people that he's been around. What a fantastic individual. We were grateful for the time that he gave us.
Yeah, well, it came through quite honestly and sincerely. And, I may be one who would love to hear 8 hours of Bruce Myers. And in fact, if we get talking long enough about Baja, I may be crying before this is over. So,
or we might just get in your 4Runner out there and drive down.
Yeah, the slow Baja 4Runner. That's my comfortable Baja truck. My 71 Land Cruiser is not so comfortable, but that's the genesis of where slow Baja came from.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into it because you show up at my house. You're average looking guy. You don't look like this crazy, dirty. I spend my life down in Baja. When was your first trip, and when did you get the bug to go back?
So I'm in my early 50s. Went to San Diego State out of high school and showed up fall of '84. Rented an apartment. Those days they didn't have any student housing, and I got an apartment. And it was like a month before school started, and I had an older cousin who was at SDSU, and he showed up, and the way we spoke to each other in those days, dude, let's go down to Puerto Nuevo and get some lobster tonight. I'm like, yeah, sounds great.
Yeah.
All right, man, I'll pick you up at 5. So he had a little Toyota, pickup truck, and he showed up with his girlfriend, and we got in the truck, and I just read an article in the LA Times that day about the mordita, the bite, and that you don't, they're really cracking down on police officers in Tijuana, and you don't. It's my first trip across the border. I was pretty paranoid. I'm reading the paper, and he said, you don't pay off police officers anymore. They're really, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to go to jail, and they're really cracking down on bribes. So, I've got that information. We drive down. We have a fabulous lobster dinner, probably too much to drink, which was why his girlfriend was there, so she could drive us home. And as we're piled into his tiny little Toyota pickup, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go sit in the back. It's a beautiful night. I'm going to sit in the back and look at the stars and take that drive from Puerto Nuevo up to the border, looking at the stars. And not 5 minutes after I get into the back of the truck, we get pulled over. Illegal to have somebody riding in the back of a truck is what we get pulled over for.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which you've never seen, I'm sure, in all of your trips to Baja.
Not even last week.
You've never seen anybody in the back of a truck. So as we're standing there, discussing the infraction, my cousin, who's pretty inebriated, pulls out his wallet, and he holds it sort of right under his chin, and he's flipping through the money in his wallet, and he pulls out a $10 bill. And he said, will this suffice? And the officer grabs his wallet and opens it up, takes out the entire contents, hands the wallet back to him, and says, get out of here. And, of course, I pile in. There are 3 of us in the truck, and we drive meekly back to San Diego, chastened. So that was August '84. I've been to Baja, I don't know, probably 100-plus times since then. Never, ever had another problem. Driven the entire length of mainland Mexico down to Chiapas and back a bunch of times. Never had any problems since. And, so that's 35 years now of traveling to Mexico and loving thy neighbor.
Yeah, what's funny, because I've been going down there since '83, maybe '84. I'm in my early 50s. Memory tries to serve me well. But I recently, this last year, got my first ticket ever. And
Wow.
It was $20. I ran a stop sign. It was in the wrong. Luckily, I was right next door to the police station, so I had to go inside and pay the $20. But like you, I've had one infraction my entire 30-plus years of going down there. It's worth bringing up because everybody worries about going down there and the horror stories that they've heard. But, man, I've covered a lot of miles, and it sounds like you have as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a time, we're talking Baja today, but I did live in mainland Mexico in Zacatecas for half a year, and the La Carrera Panamericana, which is a high-speed on-road vintage car race, kind of the most dangerous, grueling car race in the world.
They're okay. We get visitors here once in a while.
I love it. My kids are off to college. You've got young ones in the house.
We
so
don't
cool.
stop. We just keep talking.
Cool. Great. So La Carrera, I saw this race. I said, one day it's bucket list. I got to do this thing. It took me 5 years to figure out how to build a car and get down there to race it. And as you do when you're starting a car race in Chiapas and racing back to the from the southern border to the northern border over 6 days, I had a little engine trouble, and I ended up having to trailer through Mexico City, and I did get pulled over in Mexico City. I made an illegal turn with the car on the trailer and got pulled over, and I used some super skills talking to the police officer about how lost I was in Mexico City, and that I needed him to get in the car with me and help me
Wow.
get to my destination. That, obviously you could see I was super important. I had this crummy little race car on this trailer, and I'd made this illegal left turn, and through about 20 minutes of just playing as dumb as I could be and begging him to get in the car with me, to drive me, help me get to my destination. I was meeting a Mexican fellow who had offered me the water pump from his 1966 Datsun, which was the only 1966 Datsun water pump in the entire country. So I was trying to get to his shop in Mexico City to get it. And after, again, probably like 12 minutes of begging this cop and playing a complete moron, the cop let me go. And it was a 960 peso ticket. And I took my crew out to dinner the next night, 2 nights later in Zacatecas, and our bill for steaks was 960 pesos. And it was like some cosmic, karmic laugh that I had at myself, and we all had great steaks at Garufa in Zacatecas.
It's funny how we learn these little tricks on how to get around in foreign countries or how to survive or get out of a ticket. I've been lost a few times down in Mexico, and I doubt it's a secret little trick, but we'll go to a cabbie and tell him where we want to go, and we'll follow the cabbie and pay him when we get there, right? So that way we can, the whole crew and the trailers and all that. So it's a little insider trick, I guess.
That's actually standard for the La Carrera. So you do that almost well, the old racers do it. Now you have GPS and other tricks, but in the old days, to get from the finish line or to the start line was the most difficult part of the race for most racers. So the ticket was stick your navigator in the taxi. Yeah. Follow that taxi and don't pay until the race car gets to where you're going.
Until you get there.
So I'm just going to riff on about, from that 84 trip to Puerto Nuevo for lobster, it was just, those days, 18-year-old kids, they went to Tijuana. Yeah. They didn't get into bars, and, certainly there were parties at San Diego State and lots of them, but there is always a draw. There was a draw, an evil draw.
An adventure south of the border.
Yeah, and things were cheap, and we didn't have money, and so Baja, fit the bill. And once you got south of Tijuana and found out even just Rosarito and then Ensenada, and then each little mile that you made it past, there was so much less. And it was so much more adventurous just getting past Ensenada those days. Yeah. And then on the opposite side to San Felipe, to camp on the beach in Felipe, and to wake up at 6 and it was 110 degrees out.
Yeah. So. Watch the sun come up over. My first trip down to Baja was a big one. I went all the way to Bay of LA for a fishing trip. And I later on learned about TJ and Rosarito and all those other places, but it's just fascinating how much better it gets the further south you go, especially once you get past Ensenada.
Yeah, and personally, I think that sort of ends for me, just south of Todos Santos or on the East Coast, Playa Requesón. How do you say that? Playa.
Yeah, you got me.
Playa Burro, just the beaches south of Mulegé, I think, are fabulous.
Unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
The views down there, the places you can camp or the places that you can stay in, just incredible. So you spent your youth getting in trouble probably down in TJ and Rosarito and having a good time. As you got older, though, it seems like the tradition continued on of going to Mexico. Obviously, that's why we're here today.
Yeah, I left San Diego State. I had to get serious. I didn't see graduation on the horizon. I was a photographer and had an opportunity to go back to where I was from, San Francisco, and attend art school on a scholarship. I was very lucky, and I left my San Diego buddies and moved up right into downtown San Francisco. And through that, ended up, buying a motorcycle, and then kind of thinking in early 90s, hey, I'm gonna get one of those on-road, off-road BMWs and be one of those dudes, and I'm just gonna ride around the world. So I managed to get a job and get a very cool BMW Paris-Dakar, and the first place I wanted to ride it was Baja. Yeah. And then I realized, well, this bike is way too big for Baja. You get this thing stuck in the sand, you can't even pick it up.
Yeah, it can be a challenge.
I needed a 600, not a 1200. So had some good times in Baja and kept up with my old San Diego State friends, and that's really where we would gather. We'd still go to San Felipe. We would make trips down to, Guadalupe Canyon for camping, San Catine. Nothing too far. All stuff in the sort of the northern end. And then one time we just got in the car, didn't have a plan, and just kept driving and got down to Guerrero Negro and kept going south and got to Mulegé, and I'm like, wow,